praise that it's getting. Number 5 on my list is Argo. I love this movie. Ben Affleck, 3 for 3. Great director. Why didn't he get an Oscar nomination? I don't know. But, it's, again, it's something that's not to be taken too literally in terms of history. I'm sure, especially with, like, the ending, they amped up the suspense factor quite a bit. But it's not too much of a political movie, I thought. It's more kind of, it's, in a strange way, it is more than anything else like a love letter to movies themselves. I mean, when you think about, everything that relates to them, even the very beginning, it's very unique. Like, they give a whole recap just so you know the political situation and the time frame of the movie. It's shown as storyboards of a movie, which I thought was interesting. And the whole firing point of the movie is Ben Affleck. He's a troubled family man, and he's on the phone with his son, and he's watching a Planet of the Apes movie, and then that's where he gets the idea. So, the whole thing kind of stemmed from, father and son bonding over a movie, which I think is, is kind of sweet. And, just Alan Arkin as the producer character, John Goodman as the makeup artist, who all kind of bring the plan to fruition. I thought they're brilliant, really tense final scenes, and kind of Ben Affleck just, modestly carrying the movie in the lead role. It's not, a lot of people are saying, oh, you didn't get nominated for director. Well, nobody seems to say actor, but it's a really strong performance and really understated performance, I found, from Affleck. And kind of the way that he presents himself as this character, it almost in a weird way, it does reflect him as this director in real life, because he's a person, in charge of the situation, and he's kind of leading everybody through. So I thought, it was an interesting choice for him to do at this point in his career, and he was really snubbed, I think. But it's a great movie, a wonderful love letter to movies themselves, and just if you want to take some political aspects out of it, I guess you could say that Canada is great, and that's about it. So definitely one of the highlights of the year to me. Number 4 is The Dark Knight Rises. Oh, how I have struggled with this movie. I have a review of it on my channel, literally like half an hour of me talking about it. It's just impossible, though, for me to do a list of standout movies of this year and not include The Dark Knight Rises. When you think about Nolan's trilogy and, the huge undertaking that it was, it's really something that, you have to kind of step back away from to really appreciate. And this is the final chapter, really satisfying final chapter when you think about it. Just bringing the Batman character that we all know, that we all love, and just taking him to such just extremes, like testing his humanity. And a lot of people will nitpick about him being off for 8 years, and I do understand that, but this is a more human Batman than we're used to. That's kind of the whole Nolan's point. And maybe it would have even been a little bit differently. Like, I know there were some interviews with Chris Nolan where he said that it wasn't as he planned, and the Joker was going to be a more part of the third one. That was kind of the plan as it went. But of course, the late Heath Ledger, he passed away. And kind of the way I look at it, because of the huge emotion that Bruce Wayne is feeling, the turmoil, I do think he kind of works as like a surrogate almost for Chris Nolan himself. Because you got to remember, at one point, it was uncertain if he was going to do this last Batman movie. And I think he was kind of quietly distraught and just really in such a horrible state of depression after Heath Ledger died. He didn't really show it or anything, but you can't imagine how much that would hit somebody hard. So I think in a lot of ways, even more than the first two, which I do like the first two better, but I think this is a more personal movie of Nolan's. But as Batman, as this hero that we all know and love, and this protector of the city, it's just Nolan's way of like just showing that this can be seen as it's a superhero movie. He's running around in a stupid cape, but it can be art. It can be meaningful. It can inspire goodness, and it can be something special, and it can be something that inspires. So, that's the whole point of Batman, and the fact that he gives Batman a happy ending, and the fact that he makes him retire, makes him a lot more vulnerable than maybe we'd like to see. I think that's just all part of the brilliant master plan. And of course, it's just a hugely, hugely epic movie. It's a beautiful looking movie. The effects are great. Bane is a great villain in my opinion. Tom Hardy did a fantastic job. And, all the supporting players. But if you want to hear more of it, I do have a review on my channel, so you can check that out. But, I do think it is one of the best movies of the year. Number 3 is Django Unchained. Quentin Tarantino can do no wrong. He's a master filmmaker. This is a great movie. It's probably, now that I'm reflecting on it a little bit more, it is one of his best movies. And I have very, very little tiny amount studied blaxploitation movies and kind of what they stood for in their period of time. And I'm sure, like the 2 or 3 friggin' movies that I've seen that are blaxploitation and kind of what they stood for and studied those, nothing compared to Quentin Tarantino's vast knowledge. But he takes that, mixes it with the spaghetti western, makes a great genre film, and kind of, it's a very transcendent movie. Like, you have Django here, and he's, the slave, and he starts off in one area really modest, cautious, very wary of his surroundings. Then if you look at his first few scenes, if you look at his last scenes, it's an amazing transformation that he's gone through. And I think with Quentin Tarantino movies, there's this feeling that you get upon you. You really, at least from what I feel and what a lot of people express about his movies, there's like this feeling of hyper-awareness that you're watching a movie, that you are watching a genre movie, that's Quentin Tarantino's undertaking. And he does switch around with, the genres, and it's very interesting. Like, these are genre characters, crime movies, samurai movies, or, World War II movies, but, they think they're real people, which is interesting. But we know, and Tarantino knows, and he's just pulling the strings. They think they're real people. They have mundane conversations, like in Reservoir Dogs, talking about tipping, when the real action is where the robbery should be, or in Pulp Fiction, where they're talking about cheeseburgers, and and in this movie, the Ku Klux Klan people talking about the their masks and how they're impractical. So it's little touches like that, and they're almost like you're just so close to being real and getting out of the movies, like Icarus flying to the sun or whatever, if that makes any sense. And that's kind of almost like the tragedy of those characters. Like, you think they're trying to go away from their own genres, like at the end of Pulp Fiction, Jules moves away from the life, or Kill Bill, the whole point of that is the bride kind of going away from the life, trying to be normal, being a normal person. And with Django, it's getting his freedom, of course, and he reaches a point where it becomes not so much this genre classic mix-up, but almost like a really modern movie with modern action, modern music playing. And I felt that by the end of Django Unchained that he was gonna walk off the screen and into real life. So I thought it was just a fantastic undertaking. Jamie Foxx, brilliant in the movie. I know Will Smith was supposed to be in it, but I can't think of anybody better than Jamie Foxx. And of course, the supporting cast, Hugo Stiltz, of course, he was fantastic in the movie. Great performance, really, really amazing. And even like Kerry Washington, kind of like the damsel in distress. She does a great job. Samuel Jackson, Leonardo DiCaprio, just fantastic. Everybody was great in the movie. Great performances. And yeah, I do think it's one of Quentin Tarantino's best, and he's a director who'll constantly surprise you, I think, and he surprised me with this movie. Number 2 is Seeking a Friend for the End of the World. Maybe not the most talked about movie of this year, or of last year, I mean, but I thought this was just a wonderful movie. Steve Carell, Keira Knightley. Literally, the movie is literally an asteroid is heading towards Earth. Everything's going to come to an end, and it's these two finding each other, and it's a sweet romantic movie, really, and a really funny one too. I mean, you're literally dealing with the end of the world here, and they can find the comedic aspects of that. I don't think it would be, if let's say tomorrow, we hear on the news that there's an asteroid heading to Earth. I don't think anything in this movie would happen. It would be a lot different, but it is a comedy, and it is a romantic comedy, but with this insane backdrop of the world's coming to an end. And so it's a really just heartfelt and interesting and oddly existential, journey that these two characters are taking, finding each other, finding strange people along the way, finding, what humanity's all about along the way. And I thought it was a really sweet movie. And, it's just, the ending is just heartbreaking. It's just an amazingly well-made movie. I honestly think, Steve Carell, Keira Knightley, the best performances they've ever given. I was just blown away by this movie, and I hope more people will see it now that it's on video and everything. But really something that kind of affected me personally, I think. I felt really moved by it, and that doesn't happen all the time when you see a movie like this. So that's why I think it is one of the bests of the year. And my number one, numero uno, favorite movie of the year is Prometheus. What can I say? Maybe I'm a little biased. I am a huge fan of the Alien movies and of Ridley Scott. But, that alone wouldn't, compel me to put this at number one. What I'm also a fan of is, monster movies, particularly sci-fi monster movies. And, you kind of look at what Ridley Scott did for Alien, and he kind of made a legitimate movie out of, a 50s cheesy B-movie, really. And this movie takes it one step further. Not only is it made into a legitimate movie, but it's made into a really kind of philosophical kind of movie, kind of questioning humanity itself. I know a lot of people were kind of unsatisfied with the amount of questions that it brought up without the amount of answers. But I think the great thing about this movie and what makes the movie what it is and why I like it so much, it invites you to make your own comparisons. Think about, what's going on, and think about the characters and what's driving them, and, what the hell all the goo is about. But, the main point of the movie, I think, it's not about the answers. It's about the consequences to asking the questions. Kind of like, Prometheus is trying to bring fire to the earth. He gets horribly tortured. So this is what happened to these scientists when they're trying to find out the answer to the greatest questions of all time. And so it's really interesting. You can, take a look at, the characters who I think are a lot more developed than they get credit for. But again, you have to draw your own conclusions. Like the whole dynasty and, dysfunctional family aspect of Wayland and his daughter and his son, David, who's a robot. I thought that was excellently done. Kind of making you think about, humanity and robots. There's a great line in the movie. What would you do if, your creators said they created you just because they could? So there's, humans and the robots they create, and they're engineers, those big, white, disgusting-looking creatures. So I thought it was, a really probing movie, really interesting movie. A movie that's, I think, you can nitpick it to death, you really can, but, you're just, I think people are missing the point. It takes away the kind of magic of the movie, that you can kind of reflect on it and think about what it has to ask. And even all that aside, it's just a fucking awesome and scary and disgusting monster movie, and I love that, and I love the effects of the movie and how they, made a perfect marriage of both practical effects and like CGI effects. And some movies will be like a throwback movie; they'll only use practical effects. Some movies will be like CGI puke all over the place, which that isn't great either. But this movie, and I think Ridley Scott, is wise enough of a filmmaker from, his years of experience to find that they can go together perfectly if used well. So that, above all else, is just one of the reasons why I love this movie so much. Again, it's not the most loved movie of the year, but I personally found it to be a great movie, great effects, great story, something that I think is an instant classic, and kind of like Blade Runner, how it was vague too, and it had, ambiguity to it too. I think this movie is going to catch on, and I think it is going to be a classic. So, that's my top 10 of 2012. Just cranking in on a half hour here of me droning on. I thank you very much for watching. Hope this wasn't too boring. As always, comment, rate, subscribe, and yeah, so hope you have a nice day. Thank you for watching. Bye.